Why are we all so lonely and what do we do about it? Loneliness is a huge issue adults across the board are facing in America, with the number hovering somewhere around 1 in 4 adults saying they experience loneliness. The reality is that God created us to be social beings in community with other people, so something is seriously off in our culture that we need to address. Now, the antidote to loneliness is community. Our community doesn't need to be large, but we all need at least one person in our life that we can talk to, share burdens with, hold us accountable, share victories with, laugh with, get advice from. But let's be real, it can be really hard to find this. It can be hard to open up to someone and be vulnerable. And as believers, our community should probably come from our local church family. But I can tell you something, for years, like a decade of my life, I would faithfully attend church on Sundays, but I was still lonely. And this is because it is entirely possible to be around people, to have 20 people in a room together, and you're in the midst of those 20 people, but you still feel lonely. And that's because loneliness is different from the act of being alone. Loneliness is like desiring social and emotional connection to others, but feeling like you do not have it. It's feeling like you are isolated from others, whereas being alone is more of a choice to remove yourself from other people for a while to, say, read a book, be in prayer, or even just decompress from a long day of work. So how is it that even Christians are feeling lonely when Christians are supposed to have this built-in community and family in the local church? I'm going to be sharing 3 reasons why we may be experiencing loneliness, some scriptures from God's Word that highlight the importance of community, and finally finish with a few tips to building community in your life, because it can be challenging to build a community if it's something that you have struggled to build in your life. So why are we so lonely? I think as I reflect on my own life, I instantly go to my upbringing. My parents were, and still to this day are, very isolated people. I didn't grow up seeing my parents with friends. I didn't see them with mentors. We didn't regularly go to church. We didn't really regularly go to any sort of social type of gathering. And so I didn't grow up with fellowship with other people. And we were very much household family focused and family oriented. And that in and of itself isn't bad, but it shouldn't come at the experience of relationship with others. And so because I never really saw friendship and fellowship modeled from my parents, guess what? I struggled with making friends in my teenage and even adult years. Another influence my parents had, and I think others can kind of relate to this as well, is it was kind of ingrained in me that you don't talk about your problems and your weaknesses to anybody. So I never really saw my parents be vulnerable with us as kids, with family members, or really even with each other. So I was never vulnerable with anybody. I didn't know how to be vulnerable. And this eventually will come at a cost. So I was dying on the inside because I was trying to portray this perfect whole person to my wife, to my church family, at work, everywhere I went. I just wanted to be seen as being perfect, but I'm not a perfect person. I have struggles and issues just like everyone, which led to me developing unhealthy coping mechanisms, which leads me to the second reason I think we can sometimes struggle with loneliness. And that is, loneliness sometimes is more of a spiritual or sin issue. So many of us are using unhealthy coping mechanisms to try and deal with the wounds in our life. We turn to substances, we seek validation in unhealthy ways, and what we're doing is either hiding certain areas of our life from God or running away from Him. And what this does is it creates this guilt, shame cycle that many of you, like myself, probably know way too well. We begin to feel hurt, And in this case, it's loneliness that is our hurt. And because we're feeling lonely, we turn to an unhealthy coping mechanism. So, maybe it's pornography, which studies are showing, spike endorphins equivalent to hard drugs. Maybe it's street drugs, alcohol, other substances are what we turn to. Maybe we stress eat to temporarily forget about our hurt. But what happens after this is you begin to feel guilty at what you just did. And that's when the shame starts to set in. And you think, God, I'm so sorry. I know this is wrong and I shouldn't be doing this. Or maybe you feel shame because you've told yourself 100 times that you would never do this again. And here you are doing it again. And it just becomes this awful cycle that you can't get yourself out of. And so, what does this have to do with loneliness? Well, the shame that we have because of our sin can begin to make us feel like nobody can intimately know who we really are because we feel nobody could possibly love the person we have been. And I'm here to tell you to stop thinking this way. It's all a lie. It is time we stop listening to ourselves. We stop listening to the enemy of God who wants to kill, steal, and destroy, as Jesus tells us in John 10, verse 10. Because that's what the devil's doing to us. He wants to steal us of our joy, steal us of community with other believers, destroy your sense of self-worth, destroy your confidence, destroy your hope. And Jesus put shame to shame with his death on the cross, so we don't have to be in bondage to it anymore. Romans chapter 8, verse 1 says, there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. And then a third reason I think we are lonely is an unintended side effect of social media. We see everyone's best all of the time, and we think that is how the rest of the world is. They're happy, they're healthy, they're living their best life. And when we aren't experiencing that 100% of the time, we begin to isolate and feel lonely. We compare, and it's easy to think we don't measure up to other people. But when you really stop and think about social media, it's really the opposite of being social, right? You're trading real physical relationships with internet relationships. Social media isn't completely bad, but when it takes the place of real physical relationships, instead of complementing them, it can lead to loneliness. So let's stop and see what God says about community. First off, God warns us of the dangers of isolation, of this letting this loneliness consume your heart to where you are not in community with anyone and you are just fully isolated. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 warns us that the enemy seeks out those who are isolated. Now, I don't have this one memorized, but it's along the lines of be sober-minded, be watchful, for your enemy, the devil, is like a lion seeking out whom he may to devour. And so the picture is, like a lion seeking out that antelope or gazelle that's old or wounded or young and isolated from the rest of the pack, because that's the easiest one for it to kill. And so when we are isolated from community, the Bible teaches us that we are a target for the enemy. Proverbs 18 verse 1 complements this. It says that it warns us that we tend to seek out our sinful desires of the flesh when we are in isolation. Proverbs 27:17, God is telling us that we are to sharpen one another as iron sharpens iron. And Galatians chapter 6 verse 2 tells us that we aren't meant to carry our burdens alone, but we should have others who help us carry our burdens. I encourage you to stop and read each of those verses. But there are many more we could pull from. The fact is that one of the roles of the church is to act as a family and support each other and help each other draw closer to Jesus. And that kind of brings us to the last topic of this video, and that is, how do we overcome some of the barriers to building community? If it was super easy to build community, we probably wouldn't be experiencing loneliness to begin with. So how do we identify who can be a part of our community? And then how do we approach them and talk to them and open ourselves up and be vulnerable with them? Step one is intentional prayer with God. Pray that God will bring people into your life that you can share your life with. Pray for godly friends. It's interesting that the people I have in my life are not the people I think I would have chosen for myself. I kind of had this ideal friend in my mind, and when I stop and really think about it, it was essentially just like clones of myself. I wanted people just like me to be my friends. And those people, they don't exist because we are all unique. We all have different backgrounds and life experiences that we can draw from. So that's something that should be celebrated. So be in prayer, and whoever God brings into your life, you will know when it happens. Be willing to let someone you maybe wouldn't expect be a part of your community. Step two is to put yourself out there and don't fear rejection. My first few attempts at intentionally building relationships with other men were basically rejected, and they didn't go anywhere. And that was hard for me. One of the reasons I think we struggle to make friends is because of this fear of rejection. And then when it feels like you are rejected, it opens that wound. And you have to tell yourself to not take it personally, even though it feels so personal. It likely isn't. The other person may have a ton of stuff going on, or even their own baggage they are working through, where they're just not in a place to have a deep relationship, and that is okay. Just keep putting yourself out there, even if it's hard. It does get easier. Step three would be to look for opportunities to be embraced by established communities. So specifically, like if you're a man, this is what I did. Look for communities already built in your church. Join the men's group that's already meeting at your church regularly. Women, join the women's group that are already meeting, and let them kind of bring you in. That springboarded my community. And step four, this is probably the hardest part of building community, and that is to just be vulnerable. Once a little bit of trust is built, you have to let your walls down. You have to share things with other people. And what you're likely going to find, what I found as I shared things, is that all the fears you have had about sharing were things you should have never worried about. You will probably find people who are dealing with a lot of the same struggles that you are, and you are going to look back and just wish that you had shared all of this a long time ago. My last step in leaving behind loneliness and embracing community is to not just take from other people, but to also pour into other people. And what I mean by this is, don't just try to find someone who is going to listen to you vent about all of your problems. You'll just be exhausting that way. But also be the listening ear to someone else. All around you, there are people hurting. Remember, 1 in 4 adults are dealing with loneliness. So listen to someone else, pray for them, meet a need they have, and that is what community is all about.